It was early in the morning when we finally arrived in New York. The city seemed so big, so busy, and so full of possibilities. I looked around and felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. My name is Anna, and this was the start of my adventure in the Big Apple. Together with my friends, Carlos and Sarah, we had moved here to begin a new chapter in our lives. None of us spoke English very well, but we were determined to learn. We grabbed our luggage and headed to the taxi stand outside the airport. The bright yellow taxis were everywhere, and I could barely hear myself think over the noise of the city. I looked at Carlos and Sarah and said, "Let's stick together. It's our first day here, and we have a lot to do." The driver greeted us with a friendly hello, and I tried to respond with a smile. "Hi," I said, but my voice was shaky. I wasn't used to speaking English yet, and I felt a little embarrassed. We climbed into the taxi, and off we went. As we drove through the streets of New York, I couldn't help but feel amazed by how different everything was from my hometown. The skyscrapers seemed to touch the sky, and people walked by in a hurry, talking to each other in a language I was still trying to understand. The taxi driver spoke to us, but I only caught a few words here and there. "Where are you from?" he asked us, turning his head slightly to look at us in the rearview mirror. "Brazil," I said, trying to sound confident. "We just arrived." The driver smiled. "Ah, Brazil. Welcome to New York. Enjoy your stay." His words made me feel a little better. Even though I didn't understand everything, I could tell he was being kind. We kept driving, passing by Central Park, Times Square, and the Empire State Building. It was surreal to be in a city I had only seen in movies. Finally, we arrived at our new apartment. The building was tall and modern, just like everything else in the city. We quickly grabbed our bags and headed inside. The lobby was quiet, and I felt a sense of relief. At least here, we could rest for a moment. As we waited for the elevator, I looked at Carlos and Sarah and smiled. "We made it." "We did," Carlos said, his voice full of excitement. "But now we need to figure out how to get around the city," I laughed. "Yeah, that's true. Let's start with getting some breakfast." "I'm starving," we all agreed and decided to find a local cafe. The adventure was just beginning, and there was so much to learn, but I knew one thing for sure: we would face every challenge together. After a quick breakfast at a small cafe nearby, we were ready to face our next challenge, the subway. Our new apartment was in the heart of the city, and we knew we'd need to learn how to use the subway to get around. Carlos had researched a little about the subway system before we arrived, but none of us had actually seen it in person. "Okay, guys, we're going to take the subway today," I said, trying to sound confident. "I've heard it's the fastest way to get anywhere in the city." Carlos nodded. "I read about it. We need to buy tickets first, right?" "Yeah, I think so," Sarah replied. "Let's just follow the signs." We walked to the nearest subway station, which was only a few blocks away. As we entered the station, the noise of the trains and the crowd hit me. People were walking quickly, some rushing to catch their trains, while others were reading newspapers or chatting with each other. The first thing we had to figure out was how to buy a ticket. We approached the ticket machine, and I stared at it for a moment. There were so many options, and none of us spoke enough English to understand what they all meant. "I think we need to choose the type of ticket," Carlos said, pointing at the options. "But which one?" Just then, an older man standing next to us smiled and said, "You need a one-way ticket. Just press here." He pointed to a large button with the word "one-way" written on it in English. "Thank you," I said, smiling. I felt a bit embarrassed but grateful for the help. Once we had our tickets, we followed the signs to the platform. The subway was crowded, and the trains arrived quickly. People got on and off in an orderly way, and we tried to blend in. We stood near the edge of the platform, waiting for the next train. "Do we need to know which train to take?" Sarah asked. "There are so many lines." I nodded, pulling out a map I had downloaded on my phone. "I think we need the 4th line. It should take us to the part of the city we need." "Let's go for it," Carlos said, looking excited. This is going to be fun. As the train arrived, we quickly stepped on, finding some empty seats. The train was faster than I had expected, and soon we were speeding through tunnels beneath the city. I looked around at the people on the train. Some of them were talking to each other, some were reading, and others were just staring out the window. I felt a little more comfortable now that we were on the train. But just as I started to relax, I realized we didn't know when we were supposed to get off. The signs inside the train weren't very clear to us. I think we should ask someone, I said. Excuse me, do you know when we should get off for the Central Park station? A woman sitting nearby smiled and replied, Sure, it's about 2 stops away. Just listen for the announcement, and you'll know when to get off. Thank you so much, I said, feeling relieved. This was definitely a learning experience. We continued our journey, and as the train slowed down, I heard the announcement, Central Park Station. We quickly stood up and moved toward the door, excited to explore the area around the famous park. As we stepped off the train, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The subway ride had been a challenge, but we had managed it, and it wasn't as scary as I had imagined. Not bad for our first time, Carlos said, grinning. Next time, we'll be subway experts. Yeah, but now let's enjoy Central Park, Sarah added, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We walked out of the station, ready to explore, also feeling proud of ourselves for navigating the subway system. Our adventure was only just beginning, and there would be many more challenges ahead. After our adventure in the subway, we finally arrived at the office building where we had an interview scheduled for later in the day. It was a large, modern building with glass windows, and the entrance was busy with people walking in and out. As we stood in front of the building, I could feel my heart racing. Are you nervous? Carlos asked, glancing at me. Just a little, I replied, taking a deep breath. I've never had a job interview in English before. Don't worry, Sarah said, trying to reassure us. We practice a lot. We'll be fine. We entered the building and took the elevator to the floor where the interview would take place. When we arrived at the reception, a friendly woman greeted us. Hello, how can I help you? She asked with a smile. I quickly responded, Hi, we have an interview at 2 p.m. She nodded and checked her computer. Yes, you're in the right place. Please have a seat, and someone will be with you shortly. We sat down in the waiting area, surrounded by other people who seemed just as nervous as we were. I looked at Carlos and Sarah. This is it, I said. We can do this. The wait felt long, but finally, a man came out of one of the offices and called our names. Anna, Carlos, and Sarah, he asked. We all stood up, and I shook his hand. Yes, that's us, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My hands were a little sweaty, but I forced myself to smile. Great, follow me, please. We walked into his office, where we were greeted by another woman who smiled warmly at us. The man introduced himself. I'm David, and this is Linda. We're excited to meet you today. Please, take a seat. We all sat down, and David started the interview. So, tell me a little bit about yourselves. What brings you to New York? I felt a little nervous, but I took a deep breath. My name is Anna, and I'm from Brazil. I've always wanted to live in New York, and now that I'm here, I'm looking for a job to improve my English and gain experience. Carlos went next. I'm Carlos, also from Brazil. I'm interested in working in marketing. I've studied it in Brazil, and I want to learn more about it here in New York. Sarah smiled and spoke with confidence. I'm Sarah, and I'm passionate about graphic design. I've worked on a few projects in Brazil, and now I'm looking to expand my skills here. David nodded as he listened to each of us. It's great to hear that you all have specific goals. Let's talk about your English skills. How comfortable do you feel speaking English in a work environment? This question made me nervous again. My English was still a work in progress, but I wanted to show them I was trying my best. I feel comfortable, but I know I still have a lot to learn. I'm practicing every day, and I'm confident I can improve quickly, Carlos spoke up. I've been studying English for a while, but speaking it every day is still a challenge. I'm ready to learn more, Sarah added. I understand most things, but I need more practice speaking. I'm working on it. David smiled. That's perfectly fine. We all need practice. The important thing is that you're committed to improving. You'll have plenty of opportunities to practice here. The interview continued with more questions, but by the end, I felt a little more at ease. The whole experience had been a great opportunity for us to use English in a real-world setting. We had the chance to practice our speaking skills, and we had learned some new words and phrases along the way. After a while, David stood up and shook our hands again. Thank you for coming in today. We'll be in touch soon. As we left the office, I felt a sense of relief. We had done it. It wasn't perfect, but we had made it through our first English interview. I looked at Carlos and Sarah, who both smiled at me. That wasn't so bad, Carlos said. Yeah, we survived. Sarah agreed. I couldn't help but laugh. We did, and we learned so much today. We left the building, feeling proud of ourselves. The journey was still just beginning, but we knew that with every step, we were getting closer to mastering the language and adapting to life in New York. After the interview, we felt like we could take on anything. Our confidence had grown, and we were excited to continue exploring the city. Our next stop was the local supermarket. We needed to buy some groceries for the week, and we decided it would be a great opportunity to practice our English while doing something normal like shopping. As we entered the supermarket, I was immediately struck by how big it was. The aisles seemed endless, filled with products I'd never seen before. Wow, this place is huge, I said, looking around. Carlos nodded, his eyes wide. It's bigger than the markets back home for sure. We grabbed a shopping cart and started walking through the aisles. So, what do we need? Sarah asked, pulling out her phone to check the list. We need vegetables, fruit, some pasta ... and don't forget the coffee. I said, remembering how important coffee was in our daily routine back home. We headed to the produce section first. I looked at the fruits and vegetables, but everything was different. What's this? I asked, picking up a strange-looking vegetable I didn't recognize. Carlos leaned over to look. I think it's a zucchini, he said. I've seen it before, but I'm not sure how to cook it. Zucchini, I repeated, trying to remember the word. Okay, let's get one. We moved on to the next aisle to get some pasta. The shelves were full of different types, and we didn't know which one to choose. I could feel my uncertainty creeping back in. We had practiced English for many situations, but grocery shopping was one we hadn't discussed much. I think we need spaghetti, Sarah said, picking up a package with the word spaghetti on it in big letters. This looks good. We nodded, agreeing, and added it to the cart. But then, as we moved toward the checkout, we ran into a problem. At the register, the cashier smiled and started scanning our items. That will be $45.62, she said, looking up at us. I quickly fumbled through my purse, realizing I had forgotten my wallet in my bag at home. Oh no, I don't have enough money, I said, feeling embarrassed. I forgot my wallet. Carlos looked at me, concerned. It's okay, don't worry, we can work something out. But the cashier didn't seem to understand. She raised an eyebrow. You don't have your wallet? She asked again, slightly frustrated. I left it at home, I repeated, trying to stay calm. There was a moment of awkward silence as the cashier waited for us to figure something out. It felt like time was standing still. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I leave the items and go home? Should I try to explain better in English? Sarah quickly stepped forward and tried to help. We're so sorry. We forgot our wallet. Can we come back later to pay? The cashier nodded, but her tone was a little sharp. You'll have to pay before you leave, she said. Feeling embarrassed and anxious, I looked around, hoping for a solution. Then Carlos had an idea. What if we split the payment? I can pay half, and you can come back for the rest. The cashier seemed to like the idea. That works, she said. scanning Carlos's card. "You'll have to pay the rest later." I breathed a sigh of relief. As we packed our groceries into bags, I apologized again. "I am so sorry. I really didn't mean for this to happen." The cashier smiled more gently now. "No problem. Just make sure you have your wallet next time," she said. As we left the store, I couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed, also proud that we had solved the situation in English. "Well, that was an adventure," I said, smiling nervously. Carlos chuckled. "Yeah, but we did it. We got through it." Sarah nodded, and we learned some important phrases today. "I forgot my wallet." "That's useful," I laughed, feeling more relaxed. "Definitely. And I won't forget my wallet next time, that's for sure." We walked home, carrying our groceries and feeling a bit more confident. The experience had reminded us that life in a big city would bring unexpected challenges, but we could always handle them by staying calm, using the English we knew, and helping each other out. After our adventure at the supermarket, we decided to take a walk around the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the streets of New York. It felt like the perfect time to explore more of the neighborhood and maybe find a nice cafe to sit and relax. As we walked down the street, we noticed a small park just around the corner. It was quiet, with a few people sitting on benches, reading or chatting. "This looks nice," Sarah said. "Let's sit for a bit." We found an empty bench and sat down. I looked around and noticed a man sitting on the opposite bench, sketching something in a notebook. He had curly brown hair, glasses, and a friendly smile. He looked up from his sketch pad and gave us a polite wave. "Hi," he said. "How are you?" We smiled back, but for a moment, I was unsure of how to respond. My English was getting better, but I still felt shy when meeting new people. Luckily, Carlos stepped in to keep the conversation going. "We're doing great," he said, smiling. "We're new here, just moved to New York." The man's eyes lit up. "Oh, really? That's awesome. How are you liking the city so far?" "It's amazing," I said, gaining confidence, "but also a little overwhelming sometimes." "I get that," he said with a laugh. "New York is big, and there's always something happening." "I'm Sam, by the way. I'm an artist, and I come here to sketch." "I'm Anna, and this is Carlos and Sarah," I said, pointing to each of my friends. "We're just trying to learn more English and explore the city," Sam smiled. "That's great. I can give you a few tips, if you want. I speak a little Spanish, so maybe we can help each other out." We all agreed that it would be fun to practice English and help each other with our languages. Sam told us about his favorite spots in the city and some places we could visit to improve our English. There's a small cafe down the street where people meet to practice languages. Sam said it's called the Language Exchange. It's perfect for people who want to meet others and speak English in a casual setting. That sounds like a great idea. Sarah said we should check it out sometime. Sam nodded enthusiastically. "You definitely should, and if you ever need help with English, just let me know. I can also teach you a few phrases in Spanish if you're interested." I smiled, feeling more at ease. It was nice to meet someone who was friendly and willing to help us navigate the city. "Thanks, Sam. We'd love to practice with you sometime," I said. As we chatted more, I realized how important it was to meet new people, especially in a city as big as New York. It felt reassuring to know that we weren't alone in this journey. Sam's offer to help with English and his knowledge of the city made me feel more connected to my new home. Before we left, Sam invited us to join him at the cafe the following weekend. "I'll be there on Saturday. It'll be fun," he said. "I'll be waiting." "See you then," Carlos said as we all stood up to leave. We exchanged numbers, and Sam waved goodbye as we walked away. As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of excitement. Making new friends and practicing English with locals would make our time in the city even more enjoyable. "I think we made a new friend," I said it, smiling at my friends. "I like him," Sarah agreed. "It's nice to meet someone who understands how hard it can be to learn a new language," Carlos nodded. and now we have a place to practice English regularly. That's perfect. We walked back to our apartment, our steps lighter, and our spirits lifted. It wasn't just about learning English. It was about building connections, exploring the city, and experiencing all the amazing things that came with being in a new place. The weekend arrived quickly, and we were all excited to visit the cafe Sam had recommended. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the city felt alive with people walking down the streets, enjoying the warmth of the sun. We had agreed to meet Sam at the Language Exchange, a small cafe tucked between two buildings with a cozy, welcoming vibe. As we stepped inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. There were people scattered around the cafe, chatting in different languages, and it felt like the perfect environment to practice English. The walls were covered with colorful posters of different countries and phrases in various languages. It made the place feel like a community, a space where people from all over the world came to connect. "Hey, over here," Sam called out, waving at us from a corner table. We made our way to him, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. I looked at my friends and could tell that we were all thinking the same thing. This was a great opportunity, but what if we made mistakes while speaking English? "Hi, Sam," I said, trying to sound confident as we sat down. "Thanks for inviting us. Of course, I'm glad you guys could make it," Sam replied with a big smile. "So, what are you hoping to work on today?" I looked at Carlos and Sarah. "I think we need to work on understanding people better when they speak quickly," I said it, a little nervous. "Sometimes it's hard for me to catch the words when they talk fast." Sarah nodded. "Same here. And I think I need more practice with vocabulary for shopping and ordering food." Carlos smiled and added, "I like to learn more expressions for meeting the people." "I always feel a little lost when I don't know what to say." Sam nodded. "I understand, and don't worry about making mistakes. That's how we learn. You're doing great already. Let's start with some practice." He pulled out a small notebook from his bag. "First, let's practice listening. I'll say a few phrases, and I want you to repeat them after me. Don't worry about mistakes. Just try your best." We all nodded, and Sam began. "Here's the first one. Could you please repeat that?" We repeated the phrase together. "Could you please repeat that?" "Great," Sam said. "Now try saying it in a real situation. Imagine you're at a store and the cashier speaks too fast. You can use this phrase to ask them to say something again." I smiled, feeling more comfortable. "Could you please repeat that?" I said, imagining myself at a store asking for help. Sam went on with a few more phrases like, "I don't understand," and "Can you speak more slowly?" After a few rounds of practice, I started to feel a little more confident. The pressure of getting everything perfect was fading. As we practiced, I realized how important it was to let go of the fear of making mistakes. Every time I said something wrong, Sam gently corrected me, showing me the right way to say it. But it never felt like a big deal. He always encouraged me, and that made a huge difference. "Remember," Sam said, "making mistakes is normal. It's how we learn and grow. Every time you speak, you're getting better." I looked at my friends, who were also practicing with Sam, and saw the same sense of relief in their eyes. We were all in this together, and it didn't matter if we made mistakes. After a while, Sam suggested we do a small role play. "Let's practice ordering food at a cafe," he said. "I'll be the waiter, and you'll be the customer." We all took turns ordering. At first, I felt a little nervous, but then I realized it wasn't about being perfect, it was about communicating. "I'll have a coffee, please," I said when it was my turn. It felt good to say it out loud, even if my accent wasn't perfect. As the afternoon went on, we practiced more phrases, shared laughs, and helped each other out. By the end of the session, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had made mistakes, yes, but I had learned so much from them. And most importantly, I had started to overcome my fear of speaking. Before we left, Sam reminded us, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a step forward. "Thanks, Sam," I said, feeling grateful. We really appreciate your help. We'll definitely come back next week, Carlos added with a smile. This was so useful. Sarah nodded. Yeah, I feel more confident already. As we left the cafe, I couldn't help but smile. It had been a fun, productive afternoon, and I knew that with every conversation, I was getting closer to my goal of speaking English confidently. It wasn't just about learning new words or phrases. It was about overcoming fears, making connections, and becoming a little bit braver every day. As days passed, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had learned. Our time at the cafe with Sam had been a turning point for all of us. We had walked in feeling uncertain, afraid of making mistakes, but we walked out feeling more confident and excited to use English in real-life situations. The week after our meeting at the language exchange was a busy one. We each practiced the phrases Sam had taught us, using them whenever we had the chance. I practiced ordering coffee at the local cafe, asking for help in stores, and even using simple phrases with my co-workers at the office. Slowly, my fear of making mistakes started to fade. I realized that the more I practiced, the better I became. One morning, as I was walking to work, I bumped into a tourist who was clearly lost. I noticed the hesitation in their eyes as they tried to read a map. Without thinking twice, I walked up to them and said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" The tourist smiled, visibly relieved. "Yes, I'm looking for Central Park," they said in broken English. "Sure, it's not far from here," I replied, pointing down the street. "You just need to go straight, and then turn left." As I gave directions, I realized that I wasn't nervous at all. I wasn't worrying about making mistakes or being misunderstood. I was simply helping, speaking English without overthinking it. Afterward, I felt a sense of pride, not just because I helped someone, but because I had been able to do it in English. The practice at the cafe had paid off, and I was no longer afraid to speak. A few days later, I was chatting with Carlos and Sarah, and we all agreed that things had changed for the better. We had started using English more often, not just in class or during our practice sessions, but in our daily lives. We had learned to communicate more naturally without worrying too much about making mistakes. "I can't believe how much more confident I feel now," Sarah said as we sipped our coffee at a small cafe near our apartment. "I used to avoid speaking English because I was afraid of saying something wrong. Now I just go for it." Carlos laughed. "Yeah, I used to be the same way. Now I'm always asking people in English if I need help. It's funny how much better it feels when you stop being afraid." I smiled, feeling proud of all of us. The key is not to worrying too much about making mistakes. We've learned that it's okay to get things wrong. It's all part of the process. As we talk, I realized that learning English was no longer a stressful task. It had become a part of our daily routine, and we were improving without even noticing. We were no longer focused solely on grammar rules or vocabulary. Instead, we were focused on communicating, on connecting with people, and on making the most of every opportunity to speak. That evening, I sat down to reflect on everything that had happened since we first arrived in New York. I thought about the challenges we had faced, the moments of uncertainty, and the small victories along the way. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And as I looked out the window at the bright lights of the city, I realized that this was just the beginning of our journey. Learning English wasn't about being perfect, it was about progress. It was about embracing the mistakes and using them as stepping stones toward fluency. And most importantly, it was about believing in ourselves and our ability to communicate. As I closed my notebook and got ready to go to bed, I felt grateful. Grateful for the lessons I had learned, for the friends I had made, and for the opportunity to live in a city that was full of stories waiting to be shared. Tomorrow, I would wake up and face another day, another chance to practice, to improve, and to keep moving forward. And this time, I knew I wouldn't be afraid to speak.